means win on unfavorable, which is by no means impossible, right? In Hearthstone, we can talk about rock, paper, scissors, but that's not the actual representation and relationship of the matchups, because when we say favored, it probably goes 60, 70 if we're being super generous % at best, and it is that aspect that makes the format so interesting. Starting off with the opening mulligans for Posesi, I don't think Primordial Studies is high up on the priority list. I think you would love to see some card draw, and of course in Cander's Slow, anything to help him turbo the quest completion. Ooh.
Okay, not a bad starting hand whatsoever, but for Posesi on the other side, it's not a disaster. Just having Wand Thief to be able to target on a Frost spell does allow you to get through your quest quite a lot quicker. It's one of the things that you can struggle against Druid. If they just save up all their minions for one big burst turn and they don't play Glowfly, for example, in the mid-game, it can be difficult to ever complete your quest. So this is a decent way to start things off.
Surrender giving us a big smile this early, because look at this hand. Overgrowth turn 4 into Anaconda with the Germination. Maybe not quite so soon, but if he hits an Innervate by then, he can pop off almost immediately, especially with the Solar Eclipse. Really, all he's missing is some card draw.
Yep, just a Nourish, a Fungal Fortunes. Whatever he can get his hands on, it's really going to make this hand pop off. I mean, even having said that, if he can just get an Arbor up, that might just be a big enough board with Anaconda, Copy, Solar, Arbor. He'll need a bit of mana as well to make that happen, but he really doesn't need much. 1 or 2 good cards, and he's well on his way.
This is on the guess the weight there. I couldn't tell you which one was statistically correct by that point, because the deck is a little bit less evenly spaced out than the old Token Druids, but Surrender will have done the math and taken the higher statistical option, but got a bit unlucky there. As for Posesi, Prime Session just to have any card draw? Flame Strike's a bit interesting, but because it's Anaconda Druid, Flame Strike doesn't really cover enough HP on it, I think.
I think I like the Hot Streak. It gives you a way to hopefully get your quest completed a lot faster, which is quite correctly for Posesi the way you have to approach this. Trust your deck to give you the arcane spells that you need, and then just turbo out the rest.
Fair enough. If Posesi wants, he can trade away one of these fire sales. It's always the eternally awkward part that he doesn't have a freeze target, but he could start Hot Streak, play the Wand Thief, and then Brain Freeze his Wand Thief,
right,
which means that's the first step of the quest completion, and then he could still like potentially get fire sale down if he just wants to turbo the quest.
Yeah, literally, you could just play out fire sale right at that point with Hot Streak, fire sale.
AI is pretty nuts here. I'm a bit surprised he's chosen to go for that over Brain Freezing his Wand Thief, although upon second review, it's really only Lunar Eclipse that Surrender can use at this point in the game to get rid of the Wand Thief.
Yeah, that's true. I guess you can do it next turn. It does just mean it's another arcane spell, more mana that is spent on not completing the quest, because it's not only having enough spells to complete the quest, it's also having the mana and the time to do so. Spending 3 whole mana in this early game on Arcane Intellect is slowing down quite a lot.
And the fact that Surrender did have the Lunar Eclipse means that the Frost spells are effectively stranded for Posesi here. Needs to hit Barrier if he wants to get the first step of the quest completion done. Unless he's going to go Gur mode, just chuck some fireballs at the face, but I don't feel that's very reliable versus Druid when they're running the double Cenarian wards.
Yeah, I think you just dig for Thalnos here and try and Brain Freeze it away. With these options, honestly, Astromancer Solarian is looking kind of spicy to me. It's a bad matchup at the best of times, and that could be the X factor.
Having to play that and Brain Freeze it means that he'll only have 2 mana remaining, which makes the rest of the turn pretty awkward, right? Unless you want to go Hot Streak, Fire Sale. But Posesi's really just stocking up on all the card draw here. Not bothering with the quest completion, it looks like.
Yeah, it's very
super
interesting. It's the kind of play you would make when you have played Incanter's Flow, I feel like, and you can more fluidly dump the cards in your hand, whereas here, you know, again, his quest completion is just looking very slow. I guess saving up for when Surrender does start placing minions on the board, so he can go double Fire Sale, plus Flurry, plus Brain Freeze, just vomit resources onto the board, and then it will be that he can maybe clear an Anaconda board. maybe.
Yeah, this is what it looks like, right? He's saving the double fire sales, one of them with the spell damage, so that's effectively 7 points of AoE. So if Surrender goes for an Anaconda copy type play, if there's no additional health buff, it's actually one of those rare ways to get rid of multiple Anacondas all in one go. Posesi will have mana to do the 7 points AoE by next turn, right? Because he has the hot streak and the lab partner already for 0. But the problem is, what if there's an Arbor up to end that turn as well?
That is the scary bit. I still think you have to get going with your quest completion, right? Like,
but how? He has to give the lab partner in order to play a frost spell here.
Time runs out on me.
I think Posesi's committed to just holding on. He's just gearing up to clear a board. This is not a way I've seen the mage approach the matchup before, but let's see if it works out for him. Surrender surely has to feel like something's up.
Well, Surrender, sorry, can now go... he can play everything except the claw machine, right? Just Germination, Germination, Solar, Cenarian. Cenarian will cost 2.
Yeah, if you go Anaconda, Solar Eclipse, Germination, Germination, that ends up with 3 Anacondas. The Cenarian Ward will cost 2. Like you said, he can even fit in a hero power.
Oh, no, you go Solar Cenarian at the end, right? You don't even have to Solar Germination. You can still play it, I think, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, and the first Germination would cost 2, so...
Exactly, yeah.
None can stand against the Serpent Lord.
Yeah, that does look a lot better to have an additional 8-drop rather than additional Anaconda. He doesn't really need that much mana cheat, but this is what Posesi was kind of waiting for, right? He has 7 points AoE. Let's see how big the 8-drops are, though. Tiny? Good.
A little bit more like it, yeah. No Taint Heart Torment to completely end the game. But this, as you said, is what Posesi was hoping for. It's exactly what he was preparing for. It's not just an Anaconda turn. It's a relatively weak Anaconda turn. As powerful as this was for turn 6 or whatever it was for Surrender, it's still not necessarily game-winning quite yet.
But this is what Jura does. They all in, assuming Mage can't deal with everything at once. And Posesi has put together a pan out where, from what I can see, he can leave just a 6-2 Tyrion on the board. That would mean starting with Fire Sale, but it looks like he's going to start Brain Freeze instead. He's not going for a full board clear here?
Okay, interesting.
Okay. So he's prioritizing quest completion now. I guess he's freezing things and just going Flurry and then softening up for Fire Sale next turn. But it gets a bit scary if he thinks Surrender has any card draw, which he probably would have played if he had it. So Posesi's just banking on Surrender not top decking Nourish or something here.
Okay, this is smart. It allows him to turbo through his quest, right, whilst also freezing the board, so he's not going to take any damage. It's not a full board clear, as we were suggesting, but he's finally finding the time to get through these quest completions and doing it very, very well.
Yeah, this is super smart. Just didn't bother with the other Fire Sale. Now that I look at it again, it works out perfectly because he does remove all the Anacondas, freezes so he doesn't take any damage from what's remaining, and gets through the quest. Posesi's just winning.
He's just winning. This is not supposed to happen. Surrender bricked on the card draw, I guess, is the part where his plan fell apart. He didn't have the Arbor up as well. Had he had Solar Arbor as well, Soul of the Forest, it was probably just about enough to get there. But this is not even close.
Another Fire Sale here would leave just Tyrion, which, you know, Posesi could go for freezes on that if he likes, or he could just continue freezing this board. Don't even bother giving Surrender the weapon. Claw Machine, of course, draws nothing now because he's found Anaconda. So Posesi has plenty of time as long as Surrender doesn't draw card draw. And even if he does draw card draw, there's not many individual threats left. Like, Posesi's in a great spot.
And this is the interesting thing, right? It's the time that the players have, because yes, Posesi does have plenty of time, as you say, but so does Surrender, actually. You know, Posesi, even after he completes the quest, it's going to be at least 2 turns before he's killing him all the way up at, what, 40 health that he's at the moment. He's still losing, make no mistake, but he maybe has the time to draw through to Fungal, to Nourish, and set up one big final swing turn if Posesi is baited into going for the Fire Sale too early, somehow.
Might be that. I'm thinking Surrender's realistic game plan might just be swing the weapon and get another Tyrion off the other Cenarion ward, something
Sure.
like that. But Best in Shell is a decent draw, right? It's at least 2/2/7s that can hit the board right now. I don't think Surrender can realistically hope to get back-to-back card draw to make Glowfly even threatening enough. So just banking on this board now and his, I guess, 18 points of damage across 3 turns with the hero power. Maybe that gets there.
Maybe. I mean, again, the problem is that there's pretty limited burn you can actually discover in Druid to go alongside this now, like Moon-Touched Amulet or Feral Rage. Maybe with a solar eclipse is the best that you can hope for, which is not out of the question at all, but it's going to be a tall order for Surrender to be able to get there, because at the moment, it just doesn't look like he's going to be building a board.
And I love this from Posesi. He had the option to go Cram Session there instead of clearing the other 2/7, but there's really no way he loses, right? If he just makes sure that an Arbor up top deck is not dealing an additional 4 damage to him. Surrender is just going to respect the Varden as well, trying his hardest to have any minion stick, but it's going to be such an easy matter for Posesi to get rid of. Just Cram Session first, and worst case, he can use Fire Cell, but there's many better cases from this option, I think.
This is the worst kind of game as well, because if you're telling your friends about it, Surrender, you can't just be like, oh, I got so unlucky in this game. But they'd be like, well, what happened? I went Overgrowth, Anaconda, copied it twice, Solar, Cenarion, and then it's still lost. Like, he didn't even get unlucky. Even the draws afterwards with Best in Shell into Arbor up, they're decent draws. But because of Posesi's very slow, considered game plan, a game plan I would not have implemented, I would have lost this game. He won.
So cleverly engineered by Posesi. I've not seen it played this way, the matchup. Like Mage essentially a control deck here. Posesi actively accruing resources, using the time that Surrender usually would spend ramping up and drawing cards to have cards of his own, rather than turboing out the Varden, making sure that he wouldn't lose to what's a honestly pretty predictable one-time, big-time, huge push from Surrender onto the board. Posesi had enough resources to get through. Just saying that if you have the Glowfly on top of the big copy turn, the Arbor up on top of the big copy turn, I'm not beating that anyway. So I'm going to hedge for the triple Anaconda, no additional health buff type of play. And it was just so excellently done.
Great understanding of the matchup. What we love to see from Posesi. What we expect to see from Posesi at this point. Again, it's weird from Posesi. The only mistakes that we see from him are just random brain meltdown mistakes. In terms of overall game plan, we rarely, if ever, see matchup misunderstanding, which is, I think, the mark of a good Hearthstone player and also one who's putting in the practice and the work to make sure he's keeping up with these matchups.
And just draw his whole deck, why can't he?
Yeah, disgusting.
Another flow. Ignites costing 0 or 1 by this point. Cram Session into a couple Ignites. Into GG next turn because he has even more card draw.
Almost out of
Yeah,
cards.
this looks like it should be plenty enough to get the job done. Even with Ice Barrier as well, so any slim chance of, as you said, getting another Tyrion or discovering the burst damage spells, no chance whatsoever.
No chance, but the Ice Barrier is just a card that's clogging up his hand. Spend that mana so he can get all the draws to Ignites next turn. This Nourish is too little too late for Surrender. Maybe a couple turns ago, if that could have gotten to the other Cenarion ward, maybe we could be talking, but I don't see any outs now.
Surely Posesi has to have lethal here, right? He can just keep cycling through with Refreshing Spring Waters. The Hot Streak is extra mana as well.
Yeah. That's correct. He'll draw an Ignite, I think, almost certainly, off the top, and then he can Spring Water to get the other 2 Ignites, play those, Spring Water again, and get the Ignites just like you said.
Yeah, he's got it. Hot Streak, yeah, sure, why not?
Such a clean display from Posesi. He got through his deck super quickly off the back of some extra discovered Cram Sessions, but he didn't have those that early on, right? He was prioritizing Arcane Intellect, prioritizing using his regular card draw rather than completing the quest to make sure that he could get to this point and really stave off that one big wave from Surrender. After that, he just kind of fizzled out.
Yeah, and it's an interesting gambit, right? Because it's easy to say, you know, if you were to implement this strategy in your ladder games and your opponent as the druid makes this unbeatable board, you'd say, oh, what was the point? You know, there was never going to be able to clear that anyway. That's not what Posesi was preparing for. He was preparing for what he saw. If it had been one of those unbeatable druid hands where they get the Arbor up as well, the Soul of the Forest, it's just impossible to clear that. You never ever win. You just don't win those games. But he was preparing for exactly this, and he knew if that was the case, he would win. And that's the kind of contingency plan I love to see. Great matchup understanding of knowing what you can beat and what you can't beat.
Yeah, just super cool to see. And I think, I'm not necessarily sure if Posesi would always go for this sort of game plan, but I think the option started to open to him after he drew with the Arcane Intellect, saw that the hand was double Fire Sail, saw that it had Flurry and even Hot Streak, so he would be able to clear like an average to above average board from Surrender. Really the only thing it couldn't beat was the absolute nuts, like you were saying, which was that plus Soul of the Forest / Arbor up, which is, you know, the Druid, no deck in the game is beating them if they get that. So I love to see that Posesi was prepared for a more realistic outcome and absolutely overcame it.
He did indeed, and it means that now with the big upset coming in the first game of the series, Surrender is pushed onto his Priest as the best counter available to Mage. His own build of Priest that, well, I mean, I was going to say one of the weaknesses of Priest against Mage is its overall lack of burn. Double Void Shard is not that much extra burn damage. Surrender isn't even running that. He's got the Kazakus build, an incredibly minion-dense build of the list, which is good in a lot of ways against the likes of Druid, where you just want to dominate the board as much as possible. Against Mage, though, I would argue this isn't the approach, this isn't the build that you want for this matchup.
Okay, I think I tend to agree for Mage specifically. Against other like combo-based decks, say Druids or even D6 Warlocks, I much prefer the list that Surrender is running because going
Agreed.
all in on the early curve I think is very, very useful. But against Mage in particular, where they will have the board control tools later on in the game, they will have enough mana to delete your board, you do oftentimes would rather just want the burn to go over the top and play around Ice Barrier and such. It's not to say that I think Surrender's unfavored though, it's just not the ideal list, and also worth noting that Posesi is not running a bread baker of his own.
Yeah, he is not, which could make a big difference, of course. He does have, taken a look at the list, I think a reasonable build for it. He hasn't got one of these super greedy ones that runs copies of Shattering Blast just to complete the quest quicker. He's got the double barrier, the one hot streak, very, very standard, clean build of Quest Mage. But whether or not it's going to get there against this is another question, because already I'm kind of looking at just full keeping this hand, to be honest.
I think it's super sketch. I mean, it looks like a 1-2-3, but it's really not the ideal operating 1-2-3, right? Because the Homunculus doesn't wake up for a while, which means that Deceptor on curve is not going to draw you anything. And then the Mancrick on 3, that's a good card. And I almost always keep Mancrick with this build of the Priest because so much of the synergy revolves around having Mancrick and pulling Mancrick's wife as often as possible. But I actually think Surrender would be tossing the 2 cards on the right.
I mean, based on how he's played it, he'd toss Mancrick, to be honest, because he, I think, threw it away the last time we saw it, which again surprised me. I think it's just eternally the second highest mulligan win rate card in the deck after Void Touched Attendant, which is like miles above. But in the end, okay, just tossing the middle card. Makes sense. As you pointed out, that is really more of a support card for later on. And there's so much redundancy with these early drops that he should be able to find something to do.
Can understand holding on to the Homunculus because even though it's relatively slow, it's not like it's not at its full synergy the way the Twilight Deceptor would be if he had kept that full mull. But it means that Surrender has less chances at finding an aggressive turn 2 at least. And that's not ideal, but I think he is just supposed to drop the Aug Merchant and then the Tour Guide here. He doesn't have that much time versus Mage.
Yes, specifically in that order as well.
Wow. Well, okay. So what this tells me is that Surrender wants to have the Aug Merchant to protect Mancrick potentially, which is a big deal. because of cards like Fire Sale, etc. Spell damage, not that hard to come by for Posesi with the Primordial Studies.
Okay, that's an interesting top deck. The kind of card that can be used, I think mainly in this matchup to stop Fire Sale is the real break point going into turn 4. So I do expect still to see Mancrick and then probably just dump the rest of his hand, bar Benedictus, next turn.
Yeah, I can definitely see that happening. Surrender did see Posesi coin Ice Barrier, which kind of clues him into Posesi having an efficient way to spend 3 mana this next turn, whether it be through Arcane Intellect or a combination of removal spells. So the Mancrick feels a little bit sus if he is aware of the possibility of First Flame. For Posesi, it works out perfectly that it's Flame plus Ruined Orb, so that's able to clear Mancrick, progress the quest, and spend all of his mana while preserving the second Flame. I don't know if that's enough to deter Surrender from going Mancrick, because obviously the earlier you shuffle it, the wife into your deck, the more chances you have of drawing it immediately. It looks like Surrender is going to go Neophyte and Shielded instead, which is much better against the hand Posesi has.
It is, and I think the more I delve into it as well, when I think, okay, what if my opponent does have Fire Sale with this play? They're not clearing much off the board on this turn. Mancrick survives against Fire Sale on the following turn anyway. You have a Homunculus in play. By going for it this way, Fire Sale isn't even that good, which I hadn't really considered with the original line, and I think probably factored pretty heavily into Surrender's decision-making.
And the Neophyte makes things very awkward for Posesi. I'd say the One Thief top deck is a very welcome draw because he is able to put something on board alongside the first Flame this turn. I'm just unsure where the Flame goes. Is it going to take the shield off the Neophyte or get rid of the Og Merchant? I'd be partial to removing as much immediate damage as possible, especially since he doesn't have a Fire Sale in hand, so I think it shoots the Og Merchant.
Yeah, I agree. There's also some amount of consideration for Raise Dead. You want to delay it as long as possible for them to be able to Raise Dead the Cult Neophyte.
It ever just Ruined Orb even? Because the One Thief isn't actually really challenging anything with the taunt in the way.
Damn.
Okay.
Spring Water seems pretty good, yeah.
Yep, like that. It's resources. Posesi gave a pretty slow turnover, but he's very safe effectively at 36 here. Surrender has not managed to attack face at all yet this game. That 2 damage came from a ping. But now this Wriggling Horror presents some very spicy options. If Surrender wants, he can weave in the ping again this turn.
Yeah, I'm again maybe focusing too much on it, but Fire Sale is just still something I'm very heavily considering. And either way, if you go Wriggling Horror this turn, obviously you have targets on the board to buff with the Wriggling Horror. But if you go Mancrick, Tour Guide, or even just Mancrick for that matter, it's still not going to be clearing off more than 2 minions with the Fire Sale.
It's just clearing 1 effectively. I don't think Posesi would Fire Sale this board even if he had it in hand. This is the type of board that wants First Flame, Brain Freeze, Flurry, just small pieces of removal rather than one big piece instead.
Just very well maneuvered by Surrender. Very different to how I would have played it, and as usual, much better.
Okay. So right now, Posesi has access to 6 points of removal. I didn't think of it that way. I thought 2 First Flame and Ignite distributed differently, but Posesi is just going about it with the Fireball instead here. Because the other play would have removed just Mancrick and a 1/1, which is 2 more immediate attack, but truly the Fireball is the harder to use resource, and I think Posesi's trying to keep flexibility for the next turn.
So in terms of this play, it's a bit of a weird one. At first glance, I was thinking, oh, Benedictus, let's just slam that down. It's about as good as it's ever going to be, and I don't really want to treat it as a purely dead card in hand. But given that we're entering turn 5 and Flurry comes online at level 2 this turn, I think in the end I'm coming around to what Surrender is going for here, which is just go as wide as possible. Make it so that they can't freeze everything you're playing every turn. You need to get this damage face because this is starting to get a little bit scarier for him.
I love it. Every time I play Benedictus this meta on curve, I feel like, yeah, that's a 5 mana 5/6, pretty good. It almost never gets the return on investment, right?
Yeah.
Whether it gets frozen or just like immediately shot down by an unstable Fellbolt, you never really get the 5 damage that you spent 5 mana for. I much prefer Surrender Weaving and the ping, even if he has to float mana again next turn and just ping, which is very unlikely because his deck is cheap. That might be better than a Benedictus at this point in the game.
How do we feel about Incantus Flow and then double First Flame or First Flame, Second Flame, the Neophyte? Is that too greedy?
Might be. Leaves up 4 minions.
Oh, wow. Still doesn't even want to kill the Neophyte.
So this leaves up 1 more attack on board than your play, but it's stronger against Void Touched Attendant and doesn't put the Neophyte in the Raised Dead pool.
Yeah.
It's still greedy. Oh, there she is. Auntie Void Touched herself.
I mean, that is just a monstrous draw. Despite being for 1 mana, that's like the best card he could have top decked.
Only question is it ping or Benedictus? I love the ping. Surrender just gets there in 2 turns, even if this board doesn't stick.
Yeah, I'm not really seeing anything that Posesi can do to turn this one around. No way to deny the hero power space every turn. It's the same problem against Hunter as it now is against Shadow Priest with Ice Barrier just not interacting with the hero power. He throws it down. The expected result coming through this time and an 100% needed win for Surrender.
Yeah, that is huge because Surrender took down what, we theorize is an unfavorable, or rather he got taken down in what was supposed to be a favorable for him. He really needed to get this win to really have any shot in the series, but that now of course means that Posesi has his choice of counter queue, and that means that we are going to see a Quest Shaman into this aggro priest.
So, in terms of the Shaman versus the Aggro Priest, I've been playing more Face Hunter than I have Shadow Priest recently. And I've got to say, for all the, the talk about how favored Shaman is against these aggro decks, I've been doing okay as Face Hunter against Shaman. I think I get just enough damage in those early turns, unless they pop off with some huge Lightning Bloom turn right at the start and just lock down the board from turn 1 or 2. But against Shadow Priest, do you think that's the same story where they can get there? The lack of burst damage, again, does that hurt this matchup?
It's tough to say because there's this interplay of Posesi's list containing specifically the double Tidal Surges and then the double Canal Slogger, which has, I think, mostly become standard here. So the fact that there's healing, I think, balances out the fact that Surrender doesn't have any burst damage. I think it's better for Surrender in this instance to have a larger focus on board control. In both matchups, though, whether it's Face Hunter or the Shadow Priest versus Quest Shaman, I feel that a lot of the chances of the aggro deck winning is dependent on their turn 1 to 3. This early window where the Shaman is committed to playing Quest almost certainly on turn 1, if you are able to develop a minion that has greater than 3 health and have it attack twice, that can be all it needs to get over the top with either the recurring minion damage or the burst that you might run in your deck. So I'm thinking specifically Intrepid Initiate, if you can stick... there's not both Wriggling Horrors in this list for Surrender, right? Or is there?
Apologies, let me take a look at the list. 2 Wriggling Horrors, yeah?
Oh, okay, right. So for Face Hunter, it's something like Intrepid Initiate. For Priest, it's mostly the Void Touched Attendant, because if you can put health on that, even if it's just 1 Wriggling Horror, 1 Kultiran Chaplain, it is pushing way more damage than your average card. If that can stick around and not immediately die, then I think that's what Surrender needs to win the matchup.
And while Surrender has got himself, already a decent hand. If you just have Void Touched Attendant in your starting hand, you are going to be in a good spot, especially when going first. But Posesi, Bloom, and Feral Spirit, already this is the makings of a premium anti-Shadow Priest hand. Oh.
It's very strong indeed. So the Traveling Merchant is one of these X-Factor cards versus Shaman, because Shaman doesn't actually have that many ways of getting rid of big minions. Even just around 4, 5, 5, 6 is very threatening to them. They often have to generate Torrent, generate Devolving Missiles to get through that, and that's by no means guaranteed. So an interesting keep for sure from Surrender, and one that is, I think, largely informed by the fact that he runs more 1-drops than your average Shadow Priest, and he was confident that he'd be able to play 2 1-drops on turn 2.
So starting Tour Guide of all 1-drops is the least survivable out of them, as I see. So what's the reason we're starting with that instead of, say, the Squire?
Well, I think because he knows Posesi's not really going to clear anything on turn 1, he's very likely to just play Quest. So I think Surrender starts Tour Guide to give him flexibility in case he drew something that would require the Quest. Require the hero power to cost 0, like Mana Feeder, Panthera, something like that. But it's largely a formality, right? Because turn 1, they're just playing the Quest.
And there it is, the first tick of quest completion. Overload erased, which means Tidal Surge ready for next turn should it be needed. Charged Call, even just for 4 mana. It's a pretty good minion that you're going to be getting there. Not quite contesting a Traveling Merchant, but it's going to start to keep you a little bit more even on board.
Insane how much tempo Surrender has had even versus a Lightning Bloom opener. I don't think it warrants a triple trade into the 2/3s, but looking at it again, I mean, Posesi doesn't necessarily have to trade either, right? The next turn he could just Tidal Surge the 1/3 and take some good value trades, and Surrender would be forced one way or another either to have Wriggling Horror exactly and ping to get rid of the 2/2s that would remain. So he could push the 5/6 face, or very likely have to take the trade himself.
Oh man, I mean, maybe I'm being too much of a doomer, but already this just looks like it's verging on losing for Surrender pretty heavily. Like, Tidal Surge trade is enough to take it out if you need to, but just Charged Call instead to again get more stats on the board, start trading away these small minions. You just outvalue them almost every single time as Quest Shaman.
Wow, Surrender taking the trades here. Have to assume is trying to respect Perpetual Flame a little bit more. But honestly, Posesi doesn't even need to Tidal Surge this turn, right? He's very safe behind the stunt. And it will go down to 2 health, which makes the ping a little bit sketchier next turn. But I really don't like trading and Tidal Surging and having nothing on board against a 1/1 Void Touched Attendant. So we could see Charged Call here, we could see Serpent Shrine. I think anything that develops a minion is better than Tidal Surge here.
Yeah, agreed.
And because the Charge Call is going to go to 5 cost next turn, I think I favor the Serpent Shrine and just on a 1/1 and then VT over the Argent Squire maybe. It does make it very awkward because of the ping, because in that world, if he doesn't get an insane 3-drop, Surrender can just ping away the 2/2 Wolf and send the 5/6 face, and then Surrender, Posesi might be required to then Serpent Shrine trade the minion plus Tidal Surge into the 5/6. So it looks like he's going to soften the 5/6 instead, take the VT over the Auntie. Okay. It was really close.
Interesting. I really liked shooting the Traveling Merchant there instead. It's the kind of hand where you want to be able to just go Charged Call next turn and have the Traveling Merchant be dead, which was very feasible with a 3-drop that has at least 3 attack, which is most of them.
Pretty good raise dead pool for Surrender as well, as long as he doesn't get Squire. Both Tour Guide and the Void Touched Attendant are very good here. Okay, that's decent. And the Twilight Deceptor is active, although I kind of favor Surrender going for tempo rather than card draw here.
Yeah, I think Chaplain is looking very, very juicy on this turn, just to make it that little bit harder to clear off the Merchant, which at the moment isn't his win con, but it's what's keeping him in the game for the moment.
So are we thinking ping the 2/2 Chaplain and take the value trade? Yeah, I like this a lot. Oh, wait, go in face. Okay, so this doesn't protect his Coulter on Chaplain, but it means that Surrender's setting up a clock.
Just Feral Spirit instead. Sure, just keep juicing up this Charge Call. Like, we always talk about, 5 being better than 6, but if you just draw another Overload card, maybe you go Tidal Surge Overload, draw another one off the top. Like, it's very feasible to get this to 8 in the next couple of turns.
And it turns out the 5 being better than 6 is very debatable still. The average stats actually come out in favor of 6, but we can get into that a bit later because Surrender has picked up a very spicy draw now. I don't know if he's in that extreme of a position that he would deliberately give up on the draw from the Deceptor, so he dumps more cards going into an Elucia turn. I don't think he's quite in that spot yet. I would like to see King 3-1 trade. Actually, it's also awkward because the Deceptor just cannot go off this turn.
Exactly, yeah.
Too much power.
The light.
Wow.
Oh, he's just ripping the coin.
Share your thoughts with the class.
Yeah, again, one of the premier uses of Elucia in the matchup isn't to actually steal cards from your opponent, it's to make sure that they can't play with their own cards for one turn. So Twilight Deceptor, you know, have fun with that. It's really the best you're going to get.
And that's pretty bad for Posesi because it's a resource for Surrender. I mean, Posesi knows that this will get raised dead or the other Thrive. And he will, I think, just not bother playing it then.
What to do?
Because if he picks the raised dead from the Thrive, right, then he's probably going to get 2 Wolves and only have mana to play one of them. So it's kind of like netting Surrender resources. I think it's just hero power and play the Deceptor. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely agree. It's not worth taking the 4 damage from a raised dead just to give your opponent, you know, maybe worse minions off the raised dead, but even that is kind of arguable at this point in the game.
So slightly questionable order, right? Killing the aunt here. Sorry, what's it? Okay, I think my brain is being a bit weird now.
I think it was all fine.
I thought there might have been an attendant on board that he killed before going face with the 2-3, but might be going crazy. Sorry about that.
Oh, really? Oh, no, you might be right, actually.
But the Thrive for Surrender, like we said, gonna pull a Raise Dead because he's not gonna pick the... oh, he's only running 1 Thrive. My mistake.
Yeah, exactly. 1 Thrive raised dead, just making sure that he always has ability to man-crick Enraged.
I was honestly wondering if the turn would start with the 5-6 into the 2-3 and then send the Elucia in the 3-3 to put her in the Raise Dead pool.
Right, right. It was kind of fortunate for Posesi that the attack went on the non-taunted minion, otherwise it would probably have just been smash the Elucia in and hope to get it back off Raise Dead.
But I think Surrender also recognizes that just having a very strong board right now is very strong against the hand Posesi has, right? It's Charge Call, Tidal Surge, it's not Perpetual Flame, no generated landslides or anything, so going very wide might be even better than having an additional Elucia.
Ooh. That's a nice top deck, though. That we do not mind at all.
So Posesi's currently at 0. Sorry, he's played 5 Overload spells, so this would get him the 3-3 as well.
Yeah.
Played Canal Slogger, but it's so off curve.
It is off curve. So the other play is obviously Tidal Surge Charged Call, which gets him a 6-drop, but a 5-6 on the other side that has the ability to trade into your 6-drop. As opposed to just playing the Slogger, trading in, then going for Charged Call next turn. It's not an easy decision to make necessarily.
Aaron is really good, but
yeah.
Honestly, I was still looking at the Slogger just so he could one-shot the 5-6 on the other side.
Yeah.
But obviously, that's just looking at the cards Posesi has right now. If he top decks another cheap card next turn, it would be better for him to spend this mana now and then have cheap card plus Canal Slogger the next turn.
Still just incredibly hesitant to target the Traveling Merchant. Even then, I was considering shooting it with the Tidal Surge just to make it more squishy, because if you get through that, I feel like that's your ticket to unlocking the game.
Both players having played for maximum tempo, it really comes down to a top deck war now, and if I'm Surrender, I am always ignoring this Cairn. I'd like to see the Wriggling Horror buff up the Traveling Merchant to play around exactly Canal Slogger. The 7 HP is a big deal.
That's true, it is a big break point. The other ones to play around, there's no Landslide, I don't believe, in the list. Perpetual Flame, you know, you can play around Perpetual Flame by buffing Elucia, I suppose. But even then, the trade would be fairly likely to come in.
But even then, is it that bad of a pan out for Surrender if Posesi's turn is Canal Slugger into 5/6 and it dies immediately? Might be better for Posesi to, if he had Canal Slugger, trade into a 1-attack minion, so then it can't just die to ping, and it would take another trade from Surrender to actually get rid of.
That's a good point. It depends on whether there's a Divine Shield on board, though, because then you can go Divine Shield ping without giving the extra heal still.
Oh.
It gets many layers deep and very, very confusing. But the guidance, okay. Lightning Storm, okay.
That's insane! Not a full clear, but he has a taunt in the way.
Yeah, that 3/3 is absolutely huge.
And the buff on the Cairn allows him to like VT over the 5. I guess it doesn't really matter because he has the Death Rattle anyway.
Yep.
So just buff the taunt instead.
Means there has to have a ping go into it as well. Sure, that makes sense. Oh, unless you want to buff Slogger, but that's still 2 turns away, so yeah. I reckon you're just buffing that.
Takes Surrender's entire board to get through this now.
Oof. Yeah, it's starting to get to that point in the matchup, right? The Shaman has stabilized. Surrender at this point would be on the outs of top-decking Void Shard as his best possible chance. That is no longer a possibility, of course, because he is running Kazakus instead. So are we looking at, well, top-deck Kazakus? What does that afford you? You can go for a 10-cost Golem and, like, stealth, but I feel like you're dead before that happens. This is a pretty reasonable amount of pressure from Posesi.
The 10 that deals AoE instead? I don't even know.
Maybe, yeah.
Because Surrender's just not winning on board. He's really hoping there's no Slogger, but it's not just Slogger. It is Brukan Tidal Surge next turn.
Oh, that's so
Posesi
sick.
is getting out of any range of burst, if Surrender even had any, which he doesn't.
Oh, I'm just going face here if I'm Posesi. I honestly think it might just be correct to apply as much damage as possible. Lock any outs that they can get.
There you have it. Surrender falling down at the end there. Of course, the big turning point was the Lightning Storm. And you can say it's very, very lucky for Posesi to have discovered that. But in the first place, there's 2 Perpetual Flames in the deck that he hadn't hit, which is more often than not considered necessary to beat these aggressive matchups. Not just the Priest, but Hunter too.
Yep, he got the goods. Exactly what you're looking for in those aggro matchups. And I think for the most part, playing it well. I do still have some questions about how he interacted with that Traveling Merchant in the first few turns. Not targeting it with the Serpent Shrine Portal, I think, was a little ambitious to kill off a 1/1 instead of just weakening that down. Again, it had to be specifically Kultaran Chaplain, I think, for it to really get out of range. But I still think that's worth playing around. Like, taking 1 extra damage from a 1/1 in the case of, or I suppose 2 being the delta in case the Void Touch Attendant is drawn, still is worth it just to try and get that get that Traveling Merchant out the way.
Yeah, very, very small decisions stack up in these kinds of matchups where the board is the focus, the pivot of the entire matchup. And once one player really gets one of those big sweeping spells, like the Lightning Storm or the Perpetual Flame, there's almost nothing the Priest player can do to come back. So for Surrender, all about building the most annoying board possible. And you saw him go for things like buffing his Divine Shields, buffing things to 4 health in order to get out of range of Perpetual Flame. But it so happened that Lightning Storm made it easy for Posesi anyway. And it means that we end up on the Quest Shaman Mirror now, which again, I favor Surrender's list ever so slightly, but we've seen the matchup go either way, even in the favor of some of the players running the Tidal Surge, because there is so many additional ways to generate value.
Yep, that's absolutely right. I think the Entrapped Sorceress does go a long way, to be fair, to help in this matchup. Not only the Discover effect, which can be huge. If you can get Guidance, Lightning Bloom, Investment Opportunity, all of these cheap cards that you run in the deck anyway, it can be huge. But just the body. The 3-mana 3/4 is very, very nice to curve out in these early turns, because while the game can, of course, be blown out by one of these big Lightning Bloom turns, a lot of the time it isn't, and you just have to keep on chugging along with these reasonably good plays, and 3-mana 3/4 goes a very long way to help you climb into the lead. So I do think Surrender in a good spot. He's shown good understanding of the matchup as well so far, as have I learnt a lot about the matchup so far. This has been one of the steepest learning curves for me. It's been specifically the Quest Shaman Mirror, which is a lot more complicated than I gave it credit for, I think.
It really is. It's hard to keep a balance of turboing out your quest completion and still having enough resources that you actually get good usage out of Brukan towards the late game, because the fastest way to complete your quest is with the one-cost spells. But the one-cost spells can provide a lot of value, specifically Guidance, right? So if you're using that to complete the quest and not necessarily doubling up with the Note Taker, you can sometimes find yourself starve the value later on, which is why I really favor the lists that have additional discover effects, so double Entrap Sorceress, double Marsh Spawn, great for Surrender. But for Posesi, the Primal Dungeoneer is also really good because it gives him a chance at double drawing.
Yeah, I mean, both players' hands are pretty good right now. Obviously, Surrender is the aggressor at the moment with Lightning Bloom in hand, the 3/4, and the Feral Spirits as well. But Posesi is the kind of hand that can catch up. Canal Slogger, Perpetual Flame, if you had to have a defensive hand, this is about as good as you can ask for.
Yeah, the Sloggers are decent, but they're rather slow towards quest completion, so not necessarily going to be a snap play for Posesi. This turn looks like a pretty clean Engineer with Perpetual Flame. He can also just completely unload the overload from both the Flame and Lightning Bloom if he wants to go for all of that. Yeah, and he can still fit in Serpent Shrine Portal at the end of it.
Like fit in Slogger if he wants as well, depending on whether or not he wants to go with the Guidance, which I think I like. Again, just biggest minion, turn things around just like that on a dime. This matchup swings around, and Posesi now in the lead, Surrender needing to find answers.
Does have a flame of his own, but the 4 health on the Slogger is a very annoying point for Surrender to have to deal with here. He could expend a Lightning Bolt first if he wants to guarantee it. But his hand is so low value, I worry for Surrender here.
Oh, it's really annoying how it works, because he can unlock a mana crystal from the previous turn, but he can't quite maneuver that to let him play Serpent Shrine as well, unless he expends a Lightning Bloom, which feels like overkill on this turn.
This might be one of the situations where you can go for an early charged call if you feel like you're not winning in the value game plan. So you could go for that Lightning Bloom turn to fit in another bolt and a charge call and just go all in on that one minion.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. Again, it's awkward though, right? In terms of what you're overloading, you could go Lightning Bolt, Perpetual Flame, and then Bloom Charge Call, except that you're overloading 2 mana crystals. But you have to play the Bolt before the Perpetual Flame is the awkward part.
The fact that Surrender was on 1 out of 3, it really had no nice way of being unloaded, like you said, because the 2 main offenders and greatest overloaders are the Perpetual Flame and Lightning Bloom, so you'd rather get those played before you finish your first tick of the quest. But Surrender, in the end here, not going to go for anything too greedy, just clearing the board the best guaranteed way, fitting in the hero power, and hoping to draw one of the higher value options from his deck. He has Marsh Spawns, he has another Entrap Sorceress, and of course, the Guidances are a big deal. Speaking of Posesi picking up Note Takers, insane here.
Yeah, it's busted. He's taken this opportunity, wow, again, to prioritize on quest completion. It's so interesting to see how players capitalize on being ahead in this matchup. That's the most interesting thing to me, because in most matchups, if you're ahead like this, or even on board, you'd say, right, let's push the advantage. Let's get Canal Slogger online, get ahead. But for Posesi, it's, okay, I'm not dying, so let's complete the quest as quick as possible, which I think is bang on the money. I think it's exactly what you're supposed to do. It's just interesting how it works out.
Okay, I know Sottle is talking about Vivid Spores right now at his screen, but I want another charged call.
honestly, I'm kind of wondering if it's primordial studies. I've seen players pick it with a higher priority than I would have. And I think for the... I mean, I agree. I would probably pick Charged Call. But the primordial study specifically for Novice Zapper is, again, another way to start getting through your quest a little bit quicker and save some of these spells for Brucan.
It truly is a chance at faster quest completion, but I do think that Surrender's in a position here where he is losing on value. When you see the Note Taker guidance on the other side, and your only way of generating value is a Marsh Spawn, which is just one card, I think Surrender's meant to go for Lightning Bloom, Lightning Bolt, Charged Call here, and just try to win off tempo instead.
Wow, really?
I mean, he has 2 Charged Calls to do it, so...
Well, still just taking it slow. Slower and slower and slower. I guess him saying, well, he will be saying to himself, you know, it's not like I'm dying this turn. It's not like Brucan is even... Brucan is actually fairly likely to be added to their hand on this turn after a double guidance. Only 2 more spells needing to be played, I believe.
Oh, he's on stage 2, I think. Or was that Surrender?
Posesi. Yeah, Posesi played the Ellie, right? It was just bolted.
Yes,
so
okay,
I think he just has 2 more Overload cards to play.
That's right. And which 2 those would be are, it's looking like Lightning Bolt and Serpent Shrine Portal just to get it done. But he could still just go for this and then Lightning Bolt and then Brucan the next turn. My only qualm with this turn is no spell was played, so the Torrent might not be playable on the next turn. But I guess Posesi's just not expecting there to be a big development from Surrender this turn.
Yeah, and I guess if you played double Overload, you'd be at 5 mana next turn anyway, so you wouldn't be able to take advantage of that because you're always playing Brucan. So I'm fine with this play, I think.
But again, for Surrender, I think he's so far behind that if you think their next turn is the Brucan turn, just don't allow them to spend their turn playing a 7/7. If he has Urge Call, are they at 5 cost, 6 cost right now? Sorry.
I think 1 more needs to be played, so yeah, they'd be at 6 at the moment.
With a Lightning Bloom, they'd get to a threatening size indeed. But looks like Surrender is going to go for Canal Slogger instead.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, they'd be at 7 at the moment because he just completed the 2nd level of quest.
And going from 7 to 8 is a big deal, to be fair.
Yeah.
There's quite a few good 7 drops, like Alabaster and Stormwind Champion, but I don't know. I think this is a little bit too little pressure for Posesi to blink at.
Yeah, I agree completely.
The elements unbound.
It's tough. Like, Surrender from his perspective, maybe he read that he was able to keep up with Brucan, but again, even if you're just 1 turn behind your opponent, that is all the difference in the world.
Devourer, Fireheart. I think he's in one of those positions that he's that far behind. I mean, looking at it, the Forge Fiend and the Arcane Devourer are equally vulnerable to removal, right? 8 health. The armor does not matter in this matchup. It's about value from this point.
Really?
I think Surrender needed to take a risk.
Maybe, yeah. It's almost certain that both are going to die either way, or that, you know, a Colossus Scrapyard will be put in the way anyway. But it's a fair point. It's a fair point.
Might be a case of Mikasa visioning. We see that Posesi has had so many resources, and maybe Surrender had expected to at least draw another guidance or Note Taker by this point, but the window has surely closed now.
I'm wondering if you even just take your charge here just to have more attack on the board. It's probably still just Colossus for maximum statage over the next few turns, but he's going for it. It's looking like it's going to be the win for Posesi here, unless a miracle comes through for Surrender.
The storm is in me.
It's Brucan, but it's too late, it feels like.
Yeah. 1725 damage represented on board, so even with either Bolt or Serpent Shrine, still only 31.
Yeah, can go digging with Wandmaker or Primal Dungeoneer for Lightning Bolt.
I mean, even then, that would be 37, so it's still not technically there, even if you get another one.
So obviously Posesi's most scared of a charge call on the other side. That's one way you can swing the board, is to discover like double rabbit. But even that, I don't think is quite enough to win Surrender the game. It can clear all the threats, right? But Posesi has so much value.
Yeah, we are looking for some absolute miracle. I'm trying to run through it in my head, like the perfect double devolving missiles, but again, no Doomsayer in the pool makes that hard to even get the board clear that you need.
A banker! That's so nutty as well.
Yeah, that's disgusting.
Enthusiastic banker, as if Posesi needed any more resources. Okay. What about... Okay, what's the best case scenario? At least 2 rabbits, right?
I think they might even be at 9 though, right?
Are they?
Has he even completed all 10 ticks? I'm not sure.
If he's starting Fireheart, I think you might be right. So Lightning Bolt to put it at 10.
Okay, he's not going face. I was wondering if he was going to try and get some ludicrous all-face burn, 5 Lightning Bolt lethal.
If only Fireheart could give you Lightning Bloom. Alas, cannot.
Lightning Storm and you're just out of mana.
Yeah, the Storm still leaves 17 power on board, right? Because the charge in the second half of the scrapyard don't die. So...
I wonder.
I think you probably still just take it and try to go rabbit this turn and then storm the next turn.
That makes
whatever's left. Yeah.
I mean, the 1/1 totem is a big deal as well. It can take out the first half of the Colossus, which is huge.
Rabbit.
Misses on rabbit twice. And I think with no taunt available on the second option, that is going to be it.
There's really only 6 10-cost minions you can discover. I mean, this is a very easy lethal for Posesi now, right? Has to be.
Yeah.
There's 2 layers of taunt, but it's fine. Alright, I think he's got it. So to continue my point, there's really only 6 10 drops you can discover, so any one particular 10 drop is 50% to find. So for Surrender to miss on the rabbit twice in a row was a 25%er. Not lucky whatsoever.
Yeah, very, very unfortunate as he is just playing with his food here, going with all the different ways that he could possibly kill Surrender. He has done it. Posesi, our first finalist of the week. And what a turnaround for him. It's been an up and down road. Qualifying to Worlds last season, obviously an incredible performance. Starting things off 0-2, something not clicking with that first meta, but now clinical gameplay. Just looking in a great spot and going all the way to the finals.
And in that series, my highlight would once again be the very first game where he picked apart that Anaconda hand from Surrender that went wide. It had 2 8-drops and 3 3/7s. Posesi managed to take apart all the Anacondas in one turn by having that lab partner saved up, the hot streak stored, double fire sale across 2 turns, and the flurry to make sure he wouldn't even immediately kill Tyrion and take that weapon damage. It was very, very clean. I think Posesi showed a great understanding of the matchup and no signs of the slight careless mistakes that we saw yesterday.
Yeah, no sign whatsoever. His opponent is still yet to be decided, however, as we see him cleaning things up. Unfortunate for Surrender, but it's still a good week, a good first couple of weeks for him, all things considered. He walks away with 3 points 2 weeks in a row, so sitting at 6 points over after the first 2 weeks. Definitely not a bad start whatsoever. But for now, as I was saying, it's going to be Alutemu or Trehezen as Posesi's opponent. It's going to be a super exciting game, even just in terms of the subtle differences that are there between Trehezen and most of the other Japanese players.
Definitely. The lineups are very, very similar, so it will come to a bit of a mind game, I'd have to assume, on the queue order, because both players have consistently been banning Warlock all the way around, and they each have an aggro deck in the Shadow Priest, an anti-aggro deck in the Quest Shaman, and a combo deck in the Mage. So it really comes down to that kind of rock, paper, scissors relationship, and getting the right first queue will be paramount to their chances.
It will, and I can already